Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Chi Johnson and I am the Brand and Communications Manager at Intellum. Our team of award-winning customer education professionals help the largest and fastest moving brands in the world successfully educate their customers, partners, and employees. We are the disruptors, the innovators, the creators, and the doers. And for over 22 years, we have been observing and rethinking how people learn and collaborate. Organizational education is a practical solution to a lot of issues that companies face with retention, revenue, and achieving crucial business outcomes. It can often feel complicated, like most things that are worth investing in the world, but Intellum is here to help. This webinar series Underscore is our way of providing more insight into what customer education is specifically and what it can be. We prop up our internal experts, partners, customer, and industry friends to share their knowledge and real-world advice. So today, we are presenting the value of a customer-centric approach. When using education across the customer lifecycle, it typically means that the content is developed with different processes and lives in different places because each department uses different things. We are exploring how to truly unify the customer experience from beginning to end and how to leverage the power of your education platform to create consistency. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation or end of our discussion. It's less of a presentation, more of a discussion. So feel free to pop those into the Q&A panel or in the chat. You can send them directly or to the group, whichever way you prefer. But you can do that throughout the webinar so that we can kind of get going once the Q&A time starts. So it's now my pleasure to introduce to you our featured speaker, Evan Hall. Evan is a well-loved and respected customer education strategist and evangelist. Leading with a customer-first context, he brings his experience as a practitioner and strong history in designing and building scalable education solutions to help empower others. When he's not giving away free game as a free agent, wink, wink, you can find him volunteering as an umpire for Little League Baseball or serving a cold brew that he made at home. Welcome to Underscore, Evan. I'm so glad that you're here and you're sharing.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and spend some time hanging out and talking about a subject that is near and dear to my heart.
Very much so. Like we had a really good time like digging in and preparing for this chat. And I loved like hearing your point of view and why you believe so firmly in the customer-centric approach. And I think intrinsically most people do, but I want us to unpack that today. So I'm going to let you dive right on in.
Absolutely. So again, hello, everyone. My name is Evan Hall, and I design customer-centric learning programs for SaaS products. And specifically, I love solving for cross-functional outcomes. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is bringing everyone on your end into one big happy family so that you can create a better experience for your customers. And to that point, I want to get a little bit of engagement going here. In the Zoom chat, I would love for you to quickly drop in a note about what industry you serve. So my experience is in software. I have a hunch there might be a lot of folks in that boat, but maybe not everyone. So if you want to share what industry you serve, I think that would be interesting to see. And as people are putting those notes in, everything we talk about today, there's value on, like I was saying, two sides. There's value for the customer and value for us as practitioners. For the customer, it's all about creating an experience that just works, right? Simple, works without a lot of worry. On our end, yes, it's great if we can deliver that, but more importantly, we want to be able to measure our outcomes and recognize what we're doing in a more purposeful way. That's how we demonstrate that we're creating value. But sometimes doing that can be hard. So we'll talk a bit as we get deeper in around how you can do that. What are we seeing here? Definitely a lot of SaaS. Oh, we got Lisa doing student services. We've got some healthcare solutions. Very cool. I do think that we're going to talk about can work for anyone. So you're not left out at all if you don't work in SaaS. Actually, as I was thinking about, as Chi and I were preparing for this and what we'd want to cover, I realized that a lot of the ideas, at least from me, draw on retail and places where you have sort of a physical environment where it's easier to see the customer and understand their sort of holistic experience. And I think it's easy to lose that with software because the customer is somewhere else in front of their screen. And so I think there's a lot that can be learned from that. Okay, let's do a second quick chat engagement. I'm looking for one word from everyone, and I'd love to hear what's the word that comes to mind if you imagine crossing a bridge because you need to get somewhere. What's the word that comes to mind?
That's a good question. I would say click. It's the first word that comes to mind. Like, the click that you hear when you're crossing over the bridge over and over and over again. That's the thing that comes to my mind is click.
Well, while we're getting these in, Chi, would you be so kind as to bring up the first slide for us? There we go. This is the majestic eastern span of the Bay Bridge. If I want to drive into San Francisco, I go over this bridge. It's very nice, but what I really wanted to share with this, if you quickly go to the next slide, Chi, when this bridge was being rebuilt about 15 years ago, what was cool is they built it in a lot of sections and then brought those sections in. So this is a piece of that bridge being lifted up into place. And here's kind of what I was reflecting on that. And this is how the bridge building relates to what we're talking about here. If you or your team is building this little piece of a bridge, it doesn't, in some ways, it doesn't really matter how great it is if it doesn't fit in well with the rest, right? Like if you want to go across a bridge, the whole point is to get from A to B. If it's really bumpy or there's bits missing, like that's not good. So big picture, it doesn't matter how good any little piece is if the whole thing doesn't work collectively. So that's the metaphor that we're working with here. I realize probably most of us don't actually build bridges for a living. But as we think about that customer experience, it's about not just our contribution, but being aware of how our contribution slots in with the rest of the team and what the customer is experiencing. Because even if the piece that you build is perfect, if it's slotted into the bigger picture incorrectly, that it's going to create a bumpy ride for the customer going over it.
I mean, I get it. Like that makes a whole lot of sense. And I love that you picked a bridge analogy. I wonder though, why specifically a bridge? Because I'm sure there's other things that you could point to that connect one thing to another, but why specifically a bridge?
Yeah, I like the bridge analogy because you look at it, but for the most part, if you're someone going over a bridge, getting from A to B, you probably don't know how the bridge was built. You probably don't understand I certainly don't understand the physics behind it. All I care about is the outcome. I want to get over that bridge safely and hopefully quickly. And that is like such a tiny amount of the effort and thought that went into that bridge. But as a customer, that's all I care about. And if we certainly want the product or service we provide to be seen as essential. And part of that essentialness is, again, it just works. You get on the bridge and you don't even think for a moment, maybe it won't work, or maybe I should drive 2 hours around the other way. You do it because it's a no-brainer and a essential experience.
Ooh, good one, Charlie. We're building metaphorical bridges between customers and products. I love that. Imagine driving across a bridge wondering, will this work? That's exactly huge. Will this work? Am I going to plunge into the ocean right now? But okay, so yes, we've got an analogy, but like, how does this work in real life? Like, how does this translate to the customer education program?
Yeah, so let's start steering our analogy back to real life. Crossing the bridge is a customer journey, right? And different people going across that bridge may reasonably have different experiences. They may need or use different resources. They're still trying to get to that same outcome, but there's really more than one kind of flavor to the problem that's being solved.
So like one person might be going across in like a bus or on a bike or walking or maybe a freight truck. Like they have different vehicles that they're using to like go across this bridge, or like even through the internal lens, if you're thinking about that, like you've got the people who are maintaining the bridge, the ones who are coming under on a boat to like address the stuff underneath, like those are all completely different experiences, right?
Yeah, exactly. And and the maintenance worker is a great one, because in that case, they're not getting from A to B. They're getting from A to halfway to B, and then maybe turning around and going back. So recognizing that different people have different needs, different experiences is I think an important first step. I think we're almost ready for the next slide, but real quick, to the chat again, everyone. If you were to, if I were to ask you, who you create education for, you'd probably say, well, duh, Evan, for customers. What I want to ask is this: if you went one level more descriptive than just customers, how would you describe the people that you create education for? If you had to get just a little more descriptive.
For me, it's prospects. Like if I were to put them into two different buckets, it's customers, like it's Intellum customers, but it's also Intellum prospects and people who are like trying to actually apply customer education principles to their work. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Very cool. Yeah, we've got busy. So I love Angelina's very busy professionals, because there's two bits there, right? There's the urgency as well as the kind of characteristic. So I love that one. We've got marketing, sales, scientists. Very cool. Let's bring up that next slide and start looking at this. So a lot of you, I'm sure, already segment your learners, but I wanted to share this to kind of lay the foundation for what comes next. As you're imagining those customers going over that bridge and sort of, what is it that's different about them? For me, at least, the two main ways that I find myself most often thinking about it is, what's the role of this person? And the example here is, imagine Google Docs, for example. If I worked for Google and was on the Docs team, I might be thinking about certain learners, certain customers being buyers, where they care about pricing and maybe understanding the technical requirements. Then there might be an admin role where really their focus is, how do I invite new users? How do I get people onto the bridge? What happens if their car stalls along the way? What am I doing there? And then certainly just kind of the everyday users. There's another kind of way to segment, and that's the jobs to be done framework, where you've got something that's maybe a little more universal. And again, with this example of Google Docs, it might be understanding sharing and privacy. If you want to share a Google Doc with someone, you want to make sure you understand sort of the ins and outs of doing that, because what you don't want to do is share it to the wrong person, or give them power to go in and just delete all your work. So there's some knowledge that does sort of span the most or all of your potential audience, and being aware of when you are serving one or another is an important part of, again, taking that customer-centric experience of, what does the customer need? I don't want to just overwhelm them with information. I want to be very focused on what they actually need to achieve whatever journey it is that I'm trying to help them with.
I love that point about you don't want to overwhelm them, because it brings me to like this customer lifecycle graphic. If you are a long time _tuner inner attendee fan, part of our community here, you probably remember this from a chat we did called Customer Education Across the Customer Lifecycle. And we kind of outlined this. It's different for each company, but in general, like most people have the same like phases, right? And education is meant to like guide your customer from one phase to the next. But when you talk about that overwhelm piece, like I always think about how when someone becomes a customer, like Evan, you talked about this before, we tend to get like multiple things being thrown at us from multiple people, like marketing sending this thing, my CSM is sending me this thing, or, everyone's got a different goal. They've got a different like means of communication to achieve their individual goal. So anyway, like the life cycle shows like the overall customer flow, which is composed of like multiple journeys and different experiences. But I want to like, I would love for you to talk through like how taking a customer-centric approach would translate into this. Like, how does this translate to where we are today?
Absolutely. So this customer lifecycle graphic is great. I think the key thing to kind of differentiate is customer here is relating to the entity that has bought, the company that has bought your product, your service. And within here is a lot of nuance around smaller journeys that are being experienced by individuals. So right up at the top, you've got that lead prospect stage. And really within that, you've got both the customer side and the internal side. For the customer, you've got a real human being that's trying to learn and understand, how the product relates to their particular needs. Internally, you might have both the sales and marketing team, trying to help by, sending information. Whether it's more targeted, whether they're just, spraying and praying, or somewhere in between. But you've got a lot of small journeys along the way through this cycle that need to be achieved in order for the whole big picture cycle to work. But each of those smaller journeys does fit in here. So there is a means to the madness. And so the trick is, how can you organize those individual experiences and those individual needs within this broader framework?
I really like that. It really makes it make sense, because I think we often, when we talk about customer education, like you said, we think about it from an organization level, like this is the customer. So everyone within the customer is obviously needing what I'm giving, but you have to get even deeper, like you just said in the last slide, to understand who within this organization you're talking to and educating, and what exactly it is that they need to learn. I really appreciate that. Okay, so like, does that mean that the challenge becomes consistent and like unified messaging across that content?
Yeah, so I've got an example that I want to share. So company that I worked at, would have customers sign up for a trial of the product. Not very surprising. And then here's what would happen to folks who signed up for a trial. As soon as they signed up for that free software trial, the marketing team would start to send a drip feed of value proposition emails. Every couple of days. Hey, here's something that's cool about us. Here's some fun facts, etc. Doing their marketing thing, which is great. The success team, as soon as that trial is signed up, the success team would kick off a series of automated emails with suggestions around, hey, here's how to get started. Here's, some things to know about how it works. Here's some things to try. Also very cool. The support team, again, at that same time, would start displaying in-app messages with tips on setup, like, hey, have you done this setting? Or have you started, editing this, or, and then also simultaneous to that, the implementation team would start sending emails promoting webinars, like, hey, come to this webinar to learn about, how to get going, or, oh, it's, instead of inputting your initial data manually, we can help you with data imports. So here's some information about, those options. And each of those initiatives on its own, great, well-intended, well thought out, thoughtful, helpful. But the problem is it was too much stuff for the customer, and there wasn't alignment between all of those different initiatives. And so the customer's experience was they're getting bombarded from 4 or 5 different directions, and they're now having to put a lot of mental effort into figuring out which of these information sources do I listen to, which do I prioritize. Oh, it seems like these 2 things I was sent are saying the same thing, but maybe they're different, or these other 2 bits feel like they contradict each other, or, oh, you sent me this video, but wait, I feel like I just watched this video from someone else yesterday. So,
Right.
you get the sense, and the risk then is that the customer just stops paying attention because it's too, you've shifted too much of the burden on them to get the experience that they need.
So you're really making a case for me for like strategic education programs. And I really do love that because like you said, your customer will start to tune out. They'll start to say like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot of information. I don't know what I should be focusing on like most at this current stage of like my journey, right? Like I just signed up for this trial or I just decided to subscribe and like, what, what do I do? But also what I'm hearing is that it's really important to have like a unified system of knowledge. And of course, let me give this disclaimer. These webinars are never meant to sell the Intellum platform. Like, of course, I would be dumb to pretend like that's not my ultimate goal. Yes, but really, we want you to have value to be able to apply these principles to whatever platform you're using to deliver or however you're using, you're delivering education. But I think it's really important to call out here that having like a unified system of knowledge that allows each team to own their part of the customer journey, like marketing can do XYZ once a trial is initiated, or customer success can like track completion and engagement and then contact them, contact the learner to bring them back into the learning environment, right? All of those things that they live in the same place versus education having its own LMS and marketing doing everything within a content management system, right? All of those things living in disparate places it adds to that noise, but being able to have a unified system of knowledge, like a one destination will, I think you're making a case for that if I'm reading between the lines. But yeah, so am I understanding it correctly and like thinking about this in the right way, or am I like totally off base and thinking through my marketing sales lens?
No, absolutely. The way you solve for this is by putting yourself in the customer's shoes and
Mhm.
looking bigger picture at what experience they should have, and then how do you align your teams, and having some kind of purposeful system to do that is exactly what you need. So whatever the desired outcome you want, whatever that bridge you're trying to build, where you say, okay, I need users who fit this particular set of characteristics to get on the bridge, get the right resources, the right access to teams or knowledge at the right time, and then make it off the other end and have that feel for them, even if there's a lot of different people and such internally that are responsible for that. You want the customer to feel like that was one holistic single experience.
Mm.
And don't get me wrong, this is hard. If it was easy, I don't think we'd be having this webinar. People wouldn't have been interested to sign up. It's hard because you need everyone internally to buy in to this plan and to stay disciplined and to really trust in the people around you that they are trusting you to do your part, you're trusting them to do their part, and that you're contributing for the good of that customer experience.
I mean, building and maintaining trust is like very hard though. I think that's like one of the biggest challenges that most education professionals like experience in making Aguesto Academy that we've been like rolling out and having like the deep dive blogs. One of the things that Jacqueline points out is like, and one of the reasons why I think their program has been so successful for them in the launch and creation of all of the content in the program itself is because she was able to communicate that trust like within all of the people who were contributing to the program. Like that cross-team collaboration, I think, is the crux of a lot of like the challenge that people have. So how like we know that building and maintaining trust is hard, but like how do we do that? How can we get all the other stakeholders, all the people that are going to touch this customer and touch this customer's journey? How do we get them on board and build that trust?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my experience, trust comes from clarity, and knowing how you personally contribute, and knowing that you're going to be recognized for that. And so a lot of the work that goes into making this happen is around being very clear and purposeful in what the plan is, but also in the same way that you're empathizing with the customer and what you want their experience to be, empathizing with the other folks on your team and internal to your organization, and what are their motivations? What are they worried that their work's going to go unrecognized? That's a very reasonable concern, and so in this plan, building and showing how are they going to be measured, how are they going to be recognized, and then also how can they sort of see what that big picture is, have visibility into what that process looks like. Gee, if you would be so kind as to bring up the next slide,
Absolutely. Because
we
I
can see
actually,
what that might look
yeah,
like.
and I wanted to point out, like, I think a lot of times that one of those challenges is also like you've got people who within their department, like the data, you can point to the data saying like this is data as a way to provide clarity. But sometimes I think there's times when the data isn't enough. So when you're dealing with someone who's the type of function that has to lean into their gut, sales sometimes, or marketing sometimes, if I'm being honest, like getting that executive buy-in can be hard. So I think this journey in action is going to be like a great way to fight back against them wanting you to do things that you're just not going to do.
So the example here is, imagine that you are you work for a software company and you've just launched some pretty sizable, large new feature set, and you would like your customers to adopt it, whether it's because you're going to upcharge, whether you just think that if they use it, they're more likely to stay sticky for a long time. Those are kind of the assumptions going into this. But what happens in a customer focused plan is, maybe you start off on the left of the journey here with the product marketing folks, and it's on them to start raising awareness, right? Kicking off that conversation, and a measurement for them, might be getting customers booked on calls with customer success. That's the CS there, customer success. And at that point, what this plan does is it has a purposeful handoff. So now we go to the next node on here, and we've got CS, the customer success folks. They've now been handed the customers, and their role now is to really pique interest, and answer immediate questions, get a sense of interest level. But what they really want to do is get those folks now enrolled into the more in-depth material that's going to help them, the customer, make that decision around, do I want to adopt this feature? What's in it for me? So they get handed off now to customer education, and it's on customer education now to teach about the value proposition and the fit. How, as a customer, how do I recognize the value that's here for me? Is it worth my time to change the way that we currently use the product? And as a first step, you're probably looking at course completions that you're driving toward, right? Because it's pretty easy to measure, and that if someone doesn't complete the course, they can't possibly have the information you need them to have. So that's a good first step. But as all of us in education know, someone completing the course does not always correlate to understanding. So you'll notice the next node in here is still sitting with CE, customer education. And now it's turning to not just the completion, but whatever your calls to action are from the course. Whether it's getting in and playing around with the feature set, whether it's engaging in, if you're building some more interactive e-learning content, it would be testing for engagement in there possibly. But it's driving toward that implementation. And even if it may even just be asking questions to test whether that customer feels knowledgeable and ready to implement. The handoff then goes now into the actual sort of physical manifestation of implementation, where your professional services team is running through a set of milestones to get set up. Data imported, settings configured, whatever the particulars are. And then as you get through that, now you're going to start leaning on your support team, because things probably aren't going to go 100% right out of the gate, and so they're going to start seeing tickets come up because of usage, and you want to think about if you need those treated differently. Do you need the support team to be extra mindful of, hey, we've got customers coming through on this new product, so we want to either treat those tickets differently, be more purposeful around, tracking responses to them. And then as that sort of usage settles in, now customer success is probably starting to pay very close attention on time to value, because what you don't want is to stall that and have them get set up and then say, well, we just fell back in our old ways, because now all that effort was wasted. But assuming that you don't stall and they're set up, they're using this feature. Now, success in education, and the last node here, it's almost like you're kicking off a new loop, because you've probably got other users within the customer who, now that all the setup is done, now it's time to bring them on, those sort of day-to-day users, and start trying to encourage adoption throughout the organization. Because again, it's separating out the journey of how do we get that customer entity set up versus what's the experience that we create for the individual humans that are going to find different types of benefits from this. But the key along a journey like this is certainly first that it's planned, and but then also that you've got very specific ownership as well as things to measure. And one of the things that I guess I've learned the hard way is it's nice to think about all the stuff that you want to measure, but sometimes it can be really hard getting those measurements if they don't already exist. And so building your process around measurements that already exist, that are easy to get to, that are agreed upon and visible, is really important. It's going to help you sort of pitch the vision to the people that you need buy-in from, but also being able to show what this process looks like. Now, if you are, for example, on the education side, for example, knowing that, oh, I can go and take a look at, what's product marketing doing? How are those, what's the volume of calls getting booked? What, as they're getting handed off to success, how are those numbers looking? And making those metrics visible throughout the organization allows people that confidence and clarity to trust that the people around them have it covered. We trust the people we work with, but it's nice to be able to see the numbers and say, oh, good, I actually don't need to worry or fret about what those people before or after me are up to. I'm staying focused on contributing my piece.
I think something that's really important to call out here is especially because sometimes you're dealing with limited metrics. A lot of times, unfortunately, education lives as an island, right? It's its own function. It's its own team responsible for its own metrics and all of those things. But you're really making the case for shared goals. It's if you do live in an organization that as an education team, you are limited into visibility into other functions and things, like don't be afraid to send that DM, that Slack message, and reach out to a peer and say, hey, what are you measured on? Right? You're not asking in order to have them challenge their worth or their value, but you're asking them in a way to say, what metrics are you already reporting on that I can use to speak to the goals that ultimately are needing the business needs to influence this education program, to influence to continue making the investment. Because what we talk about it from having an education program that speaks to business goals, and if you're building a customer-centric approach and you're trying to make sure that you're creating a journey from beginning to end that feels complete and cohesive, if you're dealing with limited metrics and you're saying, Evan, that it's important to have those things in order to report on all of these stages, reaching across and being more cross-functional will allow you to build that trust that you've spoken on, will provide more clarity. And then naturally, if they're already measuring product adoption, or they're already measuring completions and things like that, and that that's what's going to impact a particular stage or their overall experience with your platform, then that's going to allow you to make a case for more investment in education. That's going to allow you to say hey, we're already reporting on this thing. Let's tie this to a business goal. Because ultimately, using the case of support tickets, right? if we know that support, and we've used this example in other cases as well, if we know that support tickets on a particular topic have been increased, that's an opportunity for education to solve a problem, a product problem for your customer. But that also, from the business side of it, if we're trying to make a case and get stakeholders buy-in, that creates an opportunity for you to say like, hey, by reducing support tickets here, we're able to reallocate those support resources to other things. We're able to reduce their time spent on this one particular problem. So you're killing two birds with one stone just by sharing that goal, by sharing those metrics and having insight. So I hope I got to the point there and it made sense, but like, I just wanted to call out, like, asking people what they're measured on and asking for insight in that is ultimately what's going to allow you to have access to more metrics if you're working with a space that it's limited or you don't have visibility into it.
It's exactly right. And if you look at this example, quite a few of these measurements only exist because of the purposeful handoff that's occurring. If each of these departments wasn't an island, like you said, there's less to measure. But by having a more purposeful handoff and flow, each of those touch points gives you a new measurable item that you can then say, is this, are customers getting from, not just are they getting from point A to B successfully, are they going as fast as I want them to? If, does speed getting from one step to the next correlate to good outcomes further down the path? Is it worth putting time into one stage, improving it, or is it good enough? Do you want to put your resources into improving different parts of it? But by creating a more cohesive system, it gives you more of those check-in measurable points to actually see like what is happening here, and what is that customer experience, and is it what we want it to be?
So it sounds like, education is a shared, instead of maybe it does have its own department, right? It has its own thing going on, but it does sound like education, to be most effective, should be like a shared goal amongst each department within the organization. But that raises a question, like, like, where does it live? Like, where does education live? This is a huge argument within our community, right? In our industry. So I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on, like, where do you think education should live if we're taking a customer-centric approach to developing and delivering it?
Yeah. So one of the answers to that is there's definitely a growing trend in at least in SaaS for companies to establish the chief customer officer role. And if your organization has one of those, you're probably already well along the way to what we're talking about here, because you've got a person whose job it is to look at this big picture and to coordinate all these moving pieces. If you don't have that, education really ends up being best positioned to take a leadership role in establishing this. And it by no means means that education has to own all of these functions. That's unlikely and probably not a good fit. But there's a difference, same way that you think about the difference between management and leadership. Leadership exists even without a sort of mandated solid line connection. When you think about customer education, they are really the only team that has natural touch points along the entire customer life cycle. They're there from start to finish, or they can be if your company is leveraging the education function fully. And then the other piece that starts to become really compelling is if you do have a learning management system, education is nearly always the administrator of that, the holder of the keys, so to speak. And LMSs can be really good mechanisms for creating these planned touch points, because by their design, they measure what people are doing. And that's a big part of this sort of concept being successful, is not just having that design for what you want the customer to experience, but being able to tell if they're doing it. Because if you go to a customer and say, how are things? They say, great. And that's the end of the conversation. That wasn't very helpful. You want to get into a lot more detail, but the customer doesn't necessarily know what great should look like. They're relying on you, and so you need some kind of mechanism behind the scenes to know what you expect their experience should be, and to measure that and be able to recognize when it's going well or not going well. So really, as long as education can serve this overarching journey and guiding, then in some ways it doesn't matter where they sit in the org chart, as long as they're not beholden too much to a specific department. The key is having balance and encouraging everyone to keep that customer experience the key focus.
I really love that. I think it's easy to get discouraged when you are an education program that has a very specific place, and it's kind of like stay in your lane, right? But I think it's ultimately reframing the mindset to like, this is where we want to grow. Like, even if we're not influencing each stage, or we're not influencing other parts of the customer journey right now, right? If you're taking this approach, a customer-centric approach, and you're looking at education through this lens, it gives you a roadmap, right? It gives you a plan to say like, okay, right now we may only be working in customer success. We may only be working once they've gone through implementation, and we're working on like specific metrics that relate to product adoption and making sure that they understand our platform, understand our product or service, in order to reduce churn. If that's what you're trying to deal with, if that's where you're beholden to right now, right? Making a plan, and as a team internally saying like, hey, proving the value within your lane and then making a case for expansion later on is how you show education maturity, and you're able to develop and grow into something bigger that has more impact, and the department can grow. And ultimately, if you're, I don't believe in the word selfish, but internally motivated, like career motivated, it gives you an opportunity to grow in your career and to grow in leadership and ownership over the function. Yeah, so I just wanted to like put that thing out there. Like, if you are one of those people who is like, sit in your corner, it's another way to think about it and to approach it. So what advice do you give to practitioners at any stage or whatever to take a more customer-centric approach to their programs right now?
Yeah, 2 words: ask questions. All of my advice begins with that single piece of advice: ask questions. Educate yourself on the full current state of what's happening, both the processes and the people. What processes exist today, and what are the people involved? What are they doing? And gain that understanding of, when you think about the work that you're doing now, from a customer standpoint, what happens before the work you're doing and what happens after, and how much has that played into the way you think about the work that you do. And also in asking your peers to kind of better understand what the current picture looks like, you'll also get a sense of how much they're thinking about their island, so to speak, versus what comes before and after. And just understanding the lay of the land is an essential first step. Customer reviews are a great place to start. If you're not going and reading customer reviews, on the various review sites, or if your company does surveys and whatnot internally, it's great if you can reach out and talk to customers. But if you're shy, or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, there should be a wealth of survey information that's out there that you can go and just start reading about, or even just Googling the company and seeing what are people putting on Facebook or whatever, and getting a sense of current customer sentiment. And then the next piece from there, keep asking questions to help you understand what current metrics there are, what is being measured, why is it being measured, or the lack thereof. As you get an understanding of the processes that are in place that affect the customer's experience, is there anything that's surprising to you that's not being measured, and why is it not being measured? Is it because it's too hard, or no one's thought about it? But be thinking about where there's a chance to either maybe there's data there that's just not being used. Maybe there's a way to build a process out that starts generating data that's going to be useful for assessing what the customer experience is. And then as you're asking questions and learning, one of the things that I love to do is to try and plant seeds. And so the question, have we ever tried ... is a good way to not come across, I think, as like pushy or high and mighty or judgmental of the work others are doing, but just in trying to discover the approach that people are taking now. Have we ever tried doing, sending XYZ to customers, measuring, something or other, and see what people say and kind of riff on it from there. But what you might find is you ask a question and someone says, "Oh, I don't think we have ever done that, but it's kind of a cool idea. Do you want to go do it?" And that's kind of those conversations are the first steps into building that mandate and authority to take more of a leadership role in bringing about change if it's needed. So those are some of the things I recommend. It's all about asking questions, asking lots of questions, and being inquisitive and caring. It comes from caring about the customer. If you care about the customer's experience, you'll know what questions to ask.
Those are really great considerations. I think that there's a ton of value in all of those things. One of the things you said about like digging into the customer experience itself, like as it exists now, one thing that I love to do is dig into what the conversation sales is having, because you can see what they talked about before a customer became a customer. And what people talked about if they didn't end up becoming a customer. And I love listening because you can hear just like you said, the general sentiment about your company and your product and like why it works or doesn't work. But that's something that I think a lot of other teams don't, other than marketing, outside of marketing, I don't think a lot of people think to listen to sales calls. And that's one resource that I've been like talking to a lot of my peers about, like, hey, try, if your company is recording sales calls by any means, or the salespeople are taking notes, I think they're always willing to do anything they can to help their function, which will ultimately help your function. So that's a great resource. I did have some questions pop in. If someone is starting from zero, like, are there particular data points that matter most when you're trying to get more insight into the customer's experience in order to create a more customer-centric approach?
Yeah, if you're, the short answer is yes. The long answer is it depends a lot. If you're starting from zero, I guarantee there is low-hanging fruit. And if you go and start asking some of those questions, I would, similar to what you were just saying, I would talk to someone in sales. I talk to someone who's managing support tickets. If the company has people in a customer success role, and ask them to describe what, hey, what's the average customer experience right now, and see what they say. But there's probably, if it's an organization that is smaller, still up and coming, maybe hasn't built out a formal education function yet, there probably are a lot of really great pieces there in terms of content, process, but everyone is probably wearing a lot of hats, and there just hasn't been the time or resource allocated for someone to pause and say, how can we connect these pieces? Because it doesn't have to be perfect from square one. Nothing ever is. It's incremental changes. When we looked at that example of that longer journey, you don't need to spend months building a big purposeful launch. You can do that if you're an enormous company, maybe, but even just starting with connecting two of the dots, and now that piece of the journey is better. And then you say, okay, how can we bring in the other pieces? But again, I talked about looking backward and looking forward from where you are. So how can you start bringing in the folks that are bookending you, and saying like, hey, how can we make sure that the customer's experience is the best that we can make it and meets the standard that we have.
I think that is a really great piece of advice. And we have a few other questions that I think would be better suited for, sorry, I'm trying to reshare my screen, better suited for a direct blog post, for the recap, because that way you could expound a little bit more. Sometimes we get great questions that I'm like, hey, but one more that I want to ask is that actually came through and you were prepared for it, is what's the risk for not taking a customer education approach? I mean, a customer centric approach.
Yeah, so this has had me in stitches since I saw it a week ago. And I think it sums it up well. I think this was a museum in Germany somewhere. And what you're looking at is a combination of some dinosaur bones and mammoth bones and narwhal horn for good measure. And someone worked real hard on this, and they had a bunch of real sweet fossils. So again, all the pieces, great, but at the end of the day, unless it's a museum built for humor, and my understanding is that is not what this was. It's a fail on that customer experience side.
It's like, what are you trying to teach us? Because I have no idea what I'm supposed to learn from looking at this particular combination of things. It's a perfect, I love that you have that example, because yes. Evan, this has been amazing. I definitely I knew it was going to be, and it's one of those topics that you don't realize needs a little bit more explanation. You hear customer centric approach, everyone's like, duh, but it does require as much nuance as your customer is going to have when they're looking at your product, your services, and what you're providing for them. So I really just want to thank you so much for joining us. Evan is amazing. I have his name listed that way because that's what you have to put in on LinkedIn to find him, because Evan Hall is a beautiful yet common name. But I would love for you to connect and follow him on LinkedIn so that you can stay connected. You will see his open to work banner, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that he is not just looking for a job, he's looking for the job, his next professional home. We at Intellum have had actually a few opportunities to work with Evan very closely. And he is an amazing asset to any education team. So if you are looking for your next education leader, you would be remiss not to bring him on, check him out. But then also join us next month. We do this every single month for a season. Season 3 is underway. And we would love for you to join us for our next topic, which is amplify your education program with gamification. Gamification is one of my favorite topics to talk about. It's a huge hot topic in education as a whole. And we are going to be digging in with our associate product manager, Leah Zillner, and a few special guests. So you definitely want to be in. So please, Shannon is amazing and has dropped some really important links in the chat for you. Register now. It is open. You can officially register for that. And then also, we want to continue delivering value. The reason we've been able to do this for now 3 seasons, this is going into our 3rd year, is because we take the feedback that you send and we tweak and we iterate, just like you should be doing with your education programs. So please, share your feedback with us and let us know what you like, what you didn't like, what you want to see more and less of, and underscore. If you have a topic suggestion, that's a great opportunity to put that there. But let us know how we're doing and how we can be better, like those bumper stickers on the back of a big semi truck. How's my driving? How's my hosting? How's our show? How are we doing? Evan, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share before we close?
Just a big thank you for the kind words and for having me. It was a lot of fun kind of thinking through this and planning and getting to share with everyone. And yeah, would love to connect with anyone, chat. And as Chi mentioned, we'll be putting some more thoughts into a blog or two in the very near future here to keep that conversation going.
Absolutely, and share this recording. So the recording will live on a recap blog that gets posted on Monday. It's always the Monday following. So we will have some resources for you in there, and this recording that you can share with your friends, peers, and colleagues. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.